It's time for New York City baseball, past, present, and future.
I'm back. New York City baseball, past, present, and future. My co-host is Wayne Unger. He's going to be with us a little later in the second episode, in the second part of this episode. My guest is the esteemed Robert Lipsyte, author, sports writer.
Wait. I think you want to start again. It's Lipsyte.
Lipsyte, I'm sorry. You understand, we talked off the air. I'm very nervous in your presence. But just...
Can you imagine if I was sitting next to you?
Well, let's make believe that... No, if you're sitting next to me, it'd be better. But just...
All I ask, you can say anything you want. You just have to pronounce my name right.
Okay. You know what we can do?
Lipsyte.
Let's take two. Let's take
okay.
two on this. And I'm going to push another button and then push another button, and we'll take two. Give me a break. It's me, and I am as good as I get. By the way, what part of Queens are you from? I'm from Jackson Heights.
Rego Park.
Boy, Alexander's and all that were very close, right up Junction Boulevard to get to you. Did you go to, I went to Newtown.
I went to Forest Hills High School.
Forest Hills High School. I have many friends there. And the tennis matches at Forest Hills were a big part of my youth. We were blessed to have lived in those days. Okay, take two. Here we go. You know what, Robert?
Yep.
Robert, let's just keep it going. Robert Lipsyte, New York Times. Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to be here.
All right, what the hell? This is podcast radio. I'm not Edward R. Murrow, and we're just going to have a nice talk, and I appreciate your patience with me. Let's start it out with the 1962 Mets, because after all, this is spring training, and 62 is very special to me. I was a New York Giant fan growing up. I was 11 years old. They took the team away, and for 5 years I kind of floundered as a baseball fan. The Yankees, the Braves were playing the Yankees. So many mixed emotions. I became an apologist for the Giants all these years, and so happy I was an original New York Met fan. And 62 is when Casey brought the team together. And you were a sports writer at that time and covered spring training. And I wonder, after all these years, if you look back on that, what hit you? What struck you about the experience?
Well, you know, Ralph, what amazes me most, thinking about it now, is, and you obviously know this as well, was the access that we had to the players. In 1962, I took batting practice with the Mets. I was no great ball player. I didn't even play on the Forest Hills High School team.
Right. Who played Newtown, by the way.
Well, right. But you guys probably beat us. You were tough guys in Newtown.
Oh yeah, we were real tough. We didn't have a.
Well, we thought so.
Oh, well, I don't know. It depends. It's from your perspective. I admired Forest Hills just from the standpoint. I lived in Jackson Heights, short bus ride to Forest Hills, but that bus ride at times, including going to the U.S. Open at Forest Hills, it was so exciting for me. I remember seeing Vic Sicious and Emerson and all these guys playing tennis. It was in your backyard. Do you remember that?
Well, yeah, it was in my backyard, and Forest Hills was pretty fancy, except I was on the other side of the tracks. I wasn't, in Forest Hills per se. I was in Rego Park, which, stands for Real Good Park. The developers who created it called it that. I remember for years that, guys I went to school with, when we met girls, they would say, "Where are you from? Where in Queens are you from?" And we would say Forest Hills, even though we were really from Rego Park. But the really savvy girls, they would say, "What street in Forest Hills?" And the moment we revealed our address, we were exposed.
You're exposed. Yes, like that's what made the essence of a human being in those days, or in any days, which is really kind of the way the world is. And did you enjoy growing up? Some people enjoy being a kid, and some people don't like the powerlessness of
I didn't like it. No, I hated it. And one of the main reasons I hated it was because I was a fat kid. And
you were husky in those days.
Well, husky was what it said at Barney's. Or
Barney's, right?
Yeah, or at S. Klein on the
Street.
Square. Yeah, exactly. But no, I was fat. I wasn't husky or stout or any of that stuff. I was just fat, and I didn't lose my weight till I was 14. So I don't think I really enjoyed my life per se until I was 14 years old.
Good. Coming into your own a little bit. What was life like at home? What inspired you to? You went to Columbia, so we're talking Ivy League. You had to have something going for you, seichel-wise.
Well, my parents were public school teachers.
Oh,
and yeah, and neither of them were sports fans, so there was not much in the way of sports in the house. My dad and I didn't go to the ballpark growing up. We went to the library, and once a week we went to the library. Any upper body strength I have is all based on the fact that I could take out as many books as I could carry.
And you could do that Dewey Decimal System like nobody ever.
Well, it helped me with batting averages later on.
Right, but you didn't get into journalism for the sports part of it. You got into journalism first. Am I correct?
Yeah, but I got into it for the job part of it. After I graduated from Columbia, I was coming out to your part of the world to go to graduate school at Pomona, and I needed a summer job. I answered an ad in the New York Times for what in the ad was an editorial assistant. Turned out to be copy boy in the sports department.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it all happened. I was not that interested in journalism. I was not that interested in sports. But as it turned out, I was really interested in the New York Times. It was a very exciting place and an exciting time to be there. And then, of course, this was 1957. Then everything kind of exploded in 1957 when the Giants and the Dodgers went west.
Right. So they did. I remember it well.
Right. So when
did you cover the Yankees after that?
Yeah, I did. As a young reporter, I was kind of the swing man. When somebody got sick or went on vacation, I would fill in. But I was never, I never got to be a full-time beat Yankee reporter. And in fact, I didn't really get heavily into baseball until 1962, when they decided instead of sending a real reporter to Mets spring training, they would send a feature writer, which was me. And I loved it. It was great. It really turned me on.
And this was St. Petersburg, Florida, the same person that you covered with the Yankees, Casey Stengel. You watched him get old, and but did you see his skills as a manager diminish?
I didn't really get to know Casey with the Yankees. I didn't really get to know him until that first spring training in '62 with the Mets, and he was kind of bitter by that time. He had lost the big job. But I really liked him. I thought he was terrifically smart. And I discovered one thing, that if you spent the whole night with him, he stayed up drinking all night long. If you spent the whole night with him, listening to him, what he said made absolute sense. You know, remember how they always used to put him down, Stengelis,
right?
Yeah, and the old professor, and how he was, kind of some sort of cryptic moron. But he wasn't. It was just the thing is that you couldn't drop in the middle of one of his dialogues. You had to hear the whole thing. And then it was a graduate course in baseball.
I can well imagine. What impressed me about his life more than anything was he really invented the instructional league. And, boy, that helped in the developing those Yankee players in the 50s. And I don't know what he was like as a man. I don't know the differences.
Well, he tried. I mean, he made it early in spring training. He made some kind of an effort, the little seminars, little classes on the field. But I think his problem was that, as you remember, as an expansionist team, they had either, angry old guys or kids. And a lot of those kids, desperately needed very rudimentary kindergarten instruction. Not the kind of polishing that he gave the Yankees. And the older guys, the Frank Thomas and the Gus Bell and those guys, they were beyond, listening to a manager, teach them that what they were doing all their lives was wrong.
Right.
So I don't think he was as successful with the Mets. And also, again, he was kind of soured by his experience, and he was not. He was not always kindly.
Too. Those guys you talk about, the hand he was dealt, Gus Bell, Hodges, Thomas, these guys were very, not so much Thomas, but Woodling. These guys were very old. A lot of them were.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I mean,
just over the hill.
Right. Had he had that Mets team, when everybody was 27, they would have, they would have won.
Yeah, Ashburn was about the only one who showed he hit 300, if I'm not mistaken, and
he was also a very enthusiastic guy.
Richie Ashburn.
Yeah, he was a terrific guy, and I mean, he was full of life. He really, tried to motivate other players, like Marv Throneberry, right? But I think it was a lost cause.
Yeah, well, they lost a lot of ball games, and
they sure did.
I mean, if you put their statistics in, I play simulation baseball with the computer and what have you. It's impossible to lose 120 games, you would think. They did things that were off the map defensively, and but they were entertaining. And as our mutual friend Leonard Coppett once told me in an interview, that the late Leonard Coppett said, you wanted to leave. It hurt too much to stay, but you wanted to leave. That kind of thing. It was just horrible to watch, but you couldn't leave because it was such a show and you didn't know what was coming next. Exciting times.
Well, also, I think it helped that, Dick Young of the Daily News and Jack Lang. I mean, some of the older reporters who were very excited to have a team back in really covered them very vigorously. Even though they often covered them in a negative kind of way, they still brought a kind of excitement to the whole thing. It wasn't that this was a bad team. This was the worst team.
Johnny Carson, Johnny Carson would get on and make jokes. It's a national thing. You didn't have to be a baseball fan to know that this team was flawed in many ways.
Right.
Hey, tell me about your boxing. You're a boxing writer for many years.
Yes.
And you wrote a book, a novel in the 60s, The Contender. And that really put you on the map a little bit, if I'm not mistaken.
It sold a lot of copies, and it's still, 50-odd years later, it's still out there, and, kids are reading it. You know what happened, Ralph, was that when Cassius Clay challenged Sonny Liston for the title in 1964, the New York Times, in its ultimate wisdom, didn't think it was worth sending the real boxing writer down there. I mean, Cassius was going to get knocked out in the first round. Why waste the time of that eminent gentleman? So they send the kid from Night Rewrite. And, and I had done it well enough, I guess, at spring training in '62 that they knew I wouldn't totally screw up. But they didn't think it was necessary that anybody with real boxing expertise.
I think you're being modest, but that's okay.
Well, so they sent me. And, of course, it turned out to be the career move for me because Cassius won the title. I became the boxing writer. And then traveling with him for a few years, really kind of opened up, the world for him. Do you know that I met the Beatles and Cassius Clay for the first time at the same time?
Wow. At Shea?
Did I tell you, you want to hear the story?
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
so I just flew into Miami, to cover the fight. It was a week before the fight. And my instructions from the Times were, as soon as I get to Miami, take my rental car, drive back and forth between the arena where the fight was going to be held and the nearest hospital so that I wouldn't waste any deadline time following Cassius Clay into intensive care. So I did that. And then I drive to the Fifth Street gym, which is where Cassius Clay is training, to see him for the first time. I had yet to meet him. And as I'm going up the stairs, there's these four little guys coming up behind me. Little guys, my age, they're wearing like white terry cloth cabana suits. And the minute that they hear that Cassius Clay hasn't yet arrived, they start screaming and beating on the walls and trying to leave. But the security guards, push them right up the stairs. They weren't who they were yet. Pushed them right up the stairs, and I let myself get pushed in. And all five of us got pushed into a dressing room, and we were locked in. What I found out later was that the Beatles had gone to have a photo op taken with Sonny Liston. He took one look at them, and he said, I'm not posing with them sissies. And so the Beatles got back into their limo, and they were driven as a kind of, second choice, driven down to Cassius's place to have a photo taken with him. He wasn't there. They were very angry, but now we're all locked up in this room. So I interviewed them. We talked for a little while, and suddenly the door bursts open, and all five of us kind of gasp. Because here is standing in the doorway the most beautiful creature we'd ever seen in our lives, Cassius Clay. I mean, he was bigger than we thought he was.
This guy was chiseled.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You think that's a statue in those
days? He was gorgeous, and he glowed. He was laughing, and he said, "Come on, Beatles, let's make some money." And then they followed him into the ring like kids, like kindergarten kids. And, this is all on YouTube. If you go to Cassius Clay and the Beatles, it's all on YouTube. It was amazing. The five of them are in the ring. It's as if they practiced. The five of the Beatles line up. Cassius taps one of them on the chin. They all fall down like dominoes. And they jump up. They form a pyramid, so they can reach up and try to hit him on the jaw. So, for about 10 minutes, it was the most amazing show. And then, it was over. And the Beatles went off to their destiny, and Cassius went off to his. But that was the week that was. I mean, it was really exciting. Malcolm X was lurking somewhere. There were all kinds of interesting plots and subplots. And then, in the most amazing turn of events, as we know, in the 7th round, Sonny Liston didn't answer the bell. Cassius Clay became the heavyweight champion. I became the boxing writer. And it's all history. And here we are.
Wow. What's changed from those times to this? We know what's changed. What do you attribute this incredible change in our society from those days to this day, to this time?
Well, I guess I don't know, Ralph. I mean, I really don't know. I've been kind of like all of us sitting here trying to figure out what's happening.
I mean, we get to the point where our choices are Donald Trump or Cruz, for instance, as a Republican, and where, I mean, just it bemuses me in a way, but it just amazes me. I mean, we're so polarized as a country that where's it going to go?
But let's turn it back just a little bit to just when we were talking about it. You remember the 60s, and the 60s were terribly polarizing. I mean, Muhammad Ali is now kind of a saintly character, but let's remember, half the country hated him, half the country loved him. The Vietnam War was going on. We were split. There were riots. The Democratic Convention, ended up in bloodshed in 1968. It was a terrible, terrible time. Now, maybe for you and me, it doesn't seem so terrible because we were so young and hopeful, right?
That's
and we
true.
knew that
we
knew that we would survive.
We had the Bay of Pigs thing, and we had the confrontation with Cuba, with the Russians in Cuba. They weren't all that peaceful a time.
Right. I remember the Cold War. I mean, when we were back in Queens, do you remember duck and cover? Do you remember how we were taught to dive underneath our desks
like that's
when the atomic bomb blew up?
Right. You're safe under the inkwell.
Right.
Right.
But I mean, I think we've always been messed up. Maybe we're just more alert to it now because it seems even more vivid than it ever was. But we just came through that war in Iraq, which was totally necessary, and destroyed our economy and turned people against each other. So this may be the next step. Maybe it's the end of the Roman Empire. I don't know. But it seems to me that if we look back, we can see all the red flags along the way.
Well, there's something, though, about a Congress that is going to attempt to hold off the choosing of a Supreme Court justice because the president happens to be a black man. And that's all it is at this point. I mean, to supersede the Constitution, I don't know if that's treason or who is voting for these people so that they get in to have an idea to do something like that. It amazes me.
Well, we are, Ralph. I mean, that's the old pogo joke. We've met the enemy, and it is us. People voted these palookas in.
That's what I mean.
So, I mean, the thing that scares me most is that maybe we deserve this. Maybe this is what we have coming. We're not paying attention.
Okay, well, at least it's for not paying attention, not because we're smitten by some god that we didn't impress. I mean, that's a better answer. And for not paying attention, yes. But who'd have thunk that a guy like Trump would be this far in the candidacy? I still think Romney is going to come in at the last moment and make an attempt,
At the convention?
I don't know, but I can't see them putting this guy up against either Hillary or Bernie, and I think the rift is very, very closer between Trump and Hillary than it is between Bernie and Hillary. I think big spread. I think we need a change of the system, not just the person. Because if we go on, Democrat or Republican, 4 more years of this craziness, it's really going to put us under. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. If we end up as France at the end of it, we'll be lucky.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll ask you the question that I like to ask a lot of baseball people: DH or no DH?
Oh, I don't like the DH.
Okay.
I really like the idea of pitchers learning to bat. I mean,
yeah.
DH makes it a little more exciting, but it's just about producing runs. That's one of the reasons I like the National League better.
Good. I like that answer because I'm a National League guy.
How do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. I think that for the balance of the game, a player needs to have a glove. He needs to get out there with the leather. I'm thinking that a guy like Dick Stewart, who played a little bit with the Mets at the end of his career to bring this New York City baseball thing in tune, would have been a terrific DH. He might have been a star. But him having to play in those years and wear the glove even things up. That's why baseball's a perfect game, offense and defense.
Yeah.
I love the game. And in essence, it is pitcher versus the catcher versus the hitter, mano, much like boxing. Do you does that analogy run
I think that's a good analogy. I mean, I've never thought that baseball was really a quote team game like football or basketball. It was all these little skilled players playing their own specific games. I mean, there might be little as you point out, the relationship between the pitcher and the catcher, and maybe between the shortstop and the second baseman on the double play.
Right.
But for it's really individual skills being showcased in a kind of collective atmosphere, which I kind of really like. I mean, that's one of the reasons it's my favorite game.
Right.
I love baseball.
You
Pardon?
said that your parents weren't. Did your dad? Didn't
No, they weren't. And also, growing up in Queens, as you did too, we were under no pressure, to pick a team. It's not like you were in Brooklyn. You had to be a Dodger fan. We could be any kind of fan we wanted, and I knew among my friends, you could almost tell their personalities in advance by who their team was. And I guess I was an elitist snob because I was always a Yankee fan. I actually was born in the Bronx, and then came to Queens when I was a little kid. So I had kind of birthrights to be a Yankee fan.
Yes, you did. As a matter of fact, my grandparents lived up in the Bronx, and I was the only one in the family that wasn't either a Dodger or a Yankee fan. I became a Giant fan. My grandfather took me to the Polo Grounds, and wow, it was pre-Willie, and then the same year that Willie was called up in '51, and after Willie it was tremendous. What was your first game? What was your first memory of the ballpark?
Well, the first memory was I tell you sadly was a little disappointing because I had listened to Mel Allen and for a brief while Kurt Gowdy on the radio, so I had this image of Yankee Stadium, as kind of this incredibly huge, lush greensward. So the first time that I saw it, as lovely as it was, it really wasn't as big as my imagination. But, there was Joe DiMaggio, quote, drifting over center field. And after that, I was just in love.
Yeah. You got to see the change between DiMaggio and Mantle. And that's what Casey was right into that. You got to give the man the most tremendous credit from 49 to 53, 5 years in a row. And basically the team was turned over in those years.
Right. Yeah, and it was what a wonderful team. I think it's probably the only team that I really remember. I mean, that I can, populate in my mind. I guess that's getting old.
Well, no, it's getting well seasoned. It's a better word for it. Hey, thank you, my friend. I appreciate your patience with me. And
what patience? My pleasure. Great questions, and it was wonderful talking to you.
Well, thank you. I hope you'll come back, and that's all I can tell you. Is that
well, no problem. You got my number.
Beautiful. I will call at times like this when I need the best.
Okay. All I got to say is, no Mets.
Pronounce the name right. Give me that. I'll give you that next time. I promise. I'll stay up all night studying.
Okay, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank
you. Wonderful day. My audience out there, keep on keeping on. Life's a roller coaster. You're up, you're down. Try to be the same when you're up as you are when you're down. And thank you again, Mr. Robert Lipsyte. Take care. We're back. New York baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tycho. My co-host, really, I'm the George Fenneman to him, as I am to all my co-hosts. They are the stars. And he's Mr. Queens, Mr. New York, King of Queens, Wayne Unger. How you doing, my man?
Hey, Ralph, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. This has been an exciting week in a number of ways. Had a day yesterday. You'll appreciate this. I got to talk to, on the air, Carl Erskine, and off the air, just chatting, wishing him a happy birthday, Jim Bouton, the Bulldog. And
Jim Bouton.
And the writer of a book that I think changed sports literature, at least baseball literature, and that was Ball 4. And it was pretty cool.
It most definitely did. And it's funny. Last week we had Ron Swoboda, and
that was cool. I mean, my life,
that was. And
yes, Rocky.
You were out in New York, and you had missed the 4 years when he did sports for CBS News. Jim Bouton, also in New York, did sports, I believe, for WABC. He had the same gig.
And I was going at that time as well, but just talking to him and hearing his voice, and he's still in good voice, and he slowed down like all of us a little bit. The older we get, nice mellow slow down. And he's still got a great sense of humor, and it was just nice to wish him well on his birthday. What do you remember him like as a pitcher? You were a Yankee fan. You were old enough to really get an appreciation for his bulldog qualities.
Well, I remember he came on, and he came on as a star pretty quickly, and but you know what? After like 2-3 years, he started to fade. He got traded. What I think I appreciated more? I think I appreciated his knuckleball comeback.
Right.
Later on, I believe he came back with the Braves, and he actually put on a nice little streak. It was that something like that I really appreciate. I got to say,
he came into Candlestick Park for a game, for a comeback game that I either went to or heard on the radio. I went to so many games, heard so many, I just don't remember. But one of his big comebacks was at Candlestick. And that's, because baseball is pretty much a microcosm of life. Sometimes life throws you a curveball. Sometimes baseball throws you a curveball. And coming back from adversity, adjusting to stuff, you admire him for good reason. That's that guttiness to be able to come back. I think baseball is wonderful for that reason. It really does reflect what people go through in life, and we get to study them. Imagine if people studied our lives. How are we doing today? Well, we made a good computer hookup. Well, nice. 50,000 people stand up and cheer or boo when you screw things up. So imagine the pressure these guys are under. Very cool. And he pitched on some good Yankee pitching staffs with Al Downing, and those were good years for the Yankees. And
yeah, he was there. He even caught. He was there when Ford was there, and Ralph
Howard.
Perry. Yes.
Yeah. So and he represented basically a new generation of players coming up. The Joe Pepitones came up at the same time. The Phil Linzes, and it really was a new era in baseball. It was like the late 60s, and things were changing socially in terms of women's rights, in terms of social rights, blacks. It was just it was a hectic era and a transition era to for baseball. And he wrote about it so well, and we kind of laughed. I said, Jim, the great line was when you guys are getting off the plane and some guy says, you come back from a road trip, and some guy says, look horny, here come the wives. And he just,
yeah.
Yes. He just smiled, like a little smile. He says, they were his exact words, bunch of good characters or crazy characters and stuff. I said, no more than you. You were very. And what got me about him, he was demoted. He was playing for Seattle that year when the book was done, and he got demoted. And you know where they sent him in the minors? Hawaii. that was Seattle's minor league team was Hawaii. So it wasn't really all that bad to go to Hawaii for a little.
I was about to say, what a punishment.
Yes, 2 weeks in the minors, and then they called him up again. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Jim the Bulldog and last week's Swoboda. So this is like I'm Walter Mitty with this thing, and I love to talk ball. You love to talk ball. We're in the best time of year for us, we baseball fans, and that's spring training. And I listened on the radio. We didn't even talk about this off air. I listened as background today to the Mets play the Yankees in a spring training
to a
game.
4-4 tie. How good is that? It's. I mean, how perfect can that be for two friends? One's a Yankee fan, one's a Mets fan.
Nobody
lost. Play to a 4-4 tie. Yeah, exactly.
Nobody lost.
It's like T-ball.
All right, I'm going to tell you how I became a Met fan the day I really decided I'm going to be a Met fan. And you tell me the day you decided when you were a kid that you were going to be a Yankee fan. When I was 10 or 11, my New York Giants moved to San Francisco, and I became a nomad fan. I was a giant Apollo. Loved Willie. I loved the idea that, all the old my boyhood heroes were now coaches. Alvin Dark was manager. I loved it when they won in '62. But in 61, they created the Mets, and 62 was their first year. And when I decided was the first game of spring training, my friend Marty Rose, who is from the same neighborhood Wayne and I are from, Jackson Heights, New York, we are listening on the transistor radio to the first exhibition game the Mets ever played. It was against the Yankees, and Rod Keneal, who had been a Yankee farmhand for Casey Stengel, a utility infielder of very little repute. This guy he was the master of none, jack of all trades, master of none. But he was gritty, and he won a job with the Mets by.
And he had a great nickname,
Hot Rod.
There you go.
Right?
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And he gets knocks in the winning run against the Yankees in the first exhibition game ever played by those two teams. And I said to myself, this is the Mets. This is something. And I realized, because I've been vacillating, am I going to root for this team? Is this my team or whatever? They were horrible all through the year. I stuck with them because I could not give up on a team after the Giants gave up on we kids and Giant Dodgers too and moved out. I thought that was horrible. As a kid, I mean, I'm still scarred by that on some level. That really messed us up. Not getting to see Willie in his prime, not getting to see Aaron come in on a regular basis, National League teams, Frank Robinson come in, Stan Musial come in. It wasn't right, and that's why I'm so vitally against moving an organization if there's any chance whatsoever to get them a better ballpark or whatever. But I became a Met fan that day. How'd you become a Yankee fan?
Well, now my father and my older brother were not sports fans at all. But as you know, you lived in Northridge, I lived in Southridge, and for the audience out there, this was like these apartment complexes. Actually, they were co-ops. You know, you own the apartment or you own shares in the corporation, which pretty much it kind of meant you own the apartment. So on our block, the men had what was called a men's club in one of the rumpus rooms, and they used to pay rent. And they set this rumpus room up, and they had a TV, they had a pool table, they had card tables, and yada, 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 and my father belonged. So I used to go to the men's club because they also had a soda machine. And I remember we used to get bottles of soda, 10 cents, glass bottles. And so when I used to go there, my father would always give me money for a soda. And, you know, a lot of the men would watch baseball. My father didn't watch baseball, but other guys did. And it was the 1960 season. And I remember, watching it and hearing names that I had heard, Mantle and Berra, and when I watched, I watched, and the Yankees were winning, and it's like, and the guys in the men's club, all the guys there, they all, they root. Well, I shouldn't say all, but most of them rooted for the Yankees. I think there were a couple of old-time Dodger Giant fans must have been in there, but basically they rooted for the Yankees, and so I started rooting for the Yankees. And of course, that was the only, and that season and next year, that was the only game in town anyway on TV. There was no, we didn't have cable. We didn't even have I don't even think we had the game of the week on Channel 4. I think that came later on. We used to have a game. Remember, we used to have the game of the week on Channel 4 on Saturdays.
Right. For some reason that had been blocked out for a while at one time or another. Yeah, it was.
Possible.
It wasn't. But when I grew up, a few years before, and the Giants and Dodgers were there were games on all the time. It broke the spirit of the city when the Dodgers moved and the Giants moved. And I'm beginning to think, more so for Brooklyn, I'm beginning to concede, not to think, being a Giant fan, it really messed with that borough. I mean, the Queens and New York and Manhattan, rather, they had the Yankees. But Brooklyn, boy, they were so diehard Dodger fans that it broke the spirit of that borough. And like I say, it was a horrible thing to have happen. But
let me ask you a question
sure.
on something you said. Now, you said, like, teams shouldn't move unless they really have to. Can you think of any major league teams today that really, like, you know what, if they packed up and moved, would you be like, yeah, you know what, it makes sense. Yeah, I understand.
Well,
are there any
you would have to say the A's, but not because this is not a two-team market out here that could very easily support two teams if given a ballpark and given a political situation that wasn't as convolutedly screwed up as it is out here. And again, the Giants did it in a way that really makes sense. I think any team that builds a ballpark now has to do it with their own money. You can't depend on government, city money to do it. You're going to get tax breaks, but communities can't look ahead and see things like how Colorado, how the Giants, how Philadelphia, have Pittsburgh, for instance. You build ballparks downtown, it rejuvenates the entire area. And cities and politicians sometimes can't see beyond their nose and say, well, there's going to be an outgo, and in some way we're going to have to invest, but the comeback is going to be immense because the bars, the restaurants, all the businesses around the ballparks make for income-producing, tax-paying revenue for the cities, and everybody benefits. But it just doesn't seem to work.
I don't know if the politicians miss it. I think they're afraid that their constituents and their voters are going to miss it. I think, because it's become, at some point, like, it became a very well publicized, touchy thing where, you had situations where you had cities like spending $500 million, but then when there's a shortfall somewhere else, it's, right away the press is right on it. Oh, but they had the money for that ballpark. It's right. So it kind of gets turned around and hits them in the face. But yeah, Oakland again. Yes, I'm aware of the whole situation with San Jose and everything. Tampa too. Tampa is another city that's like, that team is caught between a rock and a hard place. But I don't know if Tampa will ever. I don't care if they build another stadium or not. I don't think Tampa will support a major league team, even in a nice stadium.
It's hard in a retirement community to build a fan base. I hate to say this because I'm certainly amongst the retirees, that age group. But if you're going to build a fan base on 69-year-old men, you got some problems because 3 or 4 years from now, you're going to have a new 69-year-old man to convince to come into your ballpark, or there's going to be a rapid decline in attendance just by the way of things. Mortality sucks. Let's put it that way in a blunt way. And Tampa's playing in a ballpark that's absolutely unbearable, and that has a lot to do with it. And they really got a kick in the shorts losing Joe Madden. That takes the spirit out of it. A lot of things to consider. Tampa. Who told me the other day that Tampa might be considering moving to Montreal, who is...
There's, you know what? I don't know if that's actual talk, or if that's speculation, media speculation. Although I did read an article, and it was pretty well, it was pretty well detailed, where actually Montreal wasn't really the worst place for baseball. They had fans. They just had lousy ballparks.
Right, Jerry Park, and yeah.
And then they oh, well, you know what? When we're done with the stadium for the Olympics, we'll give it to you for baseball. But it wasn't the best baseball stadium either. So there was a lot of politics involved there. And well, look at Miami. Look at the Marlins. The Marlins too. And they got public stadium, and people are on fire there because, the owner said, well, I'm going to spend money. I'm going to bring these guys in. And he went ahead and he spent money and he brought guys in. And when they didn't start winning, he shipped them, he sold off. And, he's playing. And actually, he got there by selling out Montreal. Don't forget, Jeffrey Loria owned the Expos.
Ah, okay.
That was a whole slay of hand, in itself.
Well,
so,
they have their shot in the arm. They have a shot in the arm now because they've got Barry Bonds as the batting coach, and we'll see what happens.
They you know what? I think as a batting coach, I think he can help them, but can he? What's the word? Can he balance out the poor managing of Don Mattingly? Because he was a great hitter, but I'm sorry, I feel as though his managing leaves a lot to be desired.
Well, I can't answer to that question because I wasn't a Yankee fan and I wasn't a Dodger fan. I can't,
right.
So I really don't know. But he was one hell of a clutch hitter for the Yankees.
Oh, he was a great hitter, and he was also one of the best fielding first basemen around. He and it was funny how at the same time that New York had like the two best defensive first basemen in baseball, playing at the same time.
Olerud, if that's what you're talking about. Are you
talking
about Olerud?
No, I'm talking about Keith Hernandez.
Yeah, Olerud was another terrific first baseman.
Oh, without a doubt.
Slick as can be. Reminds me of a Ricky story. Ricky Henderson. He's playing for the Yankees, and Olerud is holding him on first base. And, Olerud's holding him on first base, and Ricky says, in his Ricky slang, he says, quote, Ricky remembers a guy who looked a lot like you, who he had a teammate. He was his teammate. He says, Ricky, we were teammates together. We were, remember me? He says, yeah, I guess I do. Ricky remembers you a little. That was the character, Ricky Henderson. And Olerud, always, I think of him, he was a pitcher in Washington, at college in Washington.
He was a pitcher, he was a two-way player.
Right.
Had a brain aneurysm.
Right.
And that's why that's why he even in the field he wore a helmet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Ricky couldn't understand why he looked so much like another guy who wore a helmet that was his teammate was. Yes, that was me. I was the same guy. I enjoy that story, and I enjoy the fact that Olerud was able to be so talented to be a major league prospect as a pitcher, and also be talented enough, obviously, to have a long career as a fielder and a hitter. I mean, that's really two separate abilities right there. And I must say, from last night, listening to my little scatterbrained thinking. Carl Erskine played, you'd have enjoyed this and you'll enjoy listening to him, play blues harmonica. This man is 89 years old. He's as cognizant as anyone you could talk to. He remembers stories from when he was 20, when he's coming up with the Dodgers. But at the end of the show, he had promised me on the phone, he said if he liked the show, he'll play the harmonica for me. I expected Mary Had a Little Lamb, to be honest with you. He comes on, and I told him that, too. I was amazed at how really good he played. And for someone with no talent, to see people like John DeQuisto, former Major League pitcher, a buddy of mine, who's a painter, an artist of great work.
Oh, I see a lot of his work on Facebook. Yeah, extremely talented.
Extremely talented. And to be able to do that and to have thrown a pitch 102 miles an hour once in his career, probably more than once, clocked at 102 miles an hour. Yeah, that's multi-talented individuals makes up for me.
It makes up for both of us.
Although I can, now wait a second, I must say, what's your favorite number? What number would be your favorite number if you had to wear a uniform? I tell you what. And before A-Rod had it, I wore number 13. When I was a kid, I remember I either had number 7 or number 36. Okay, well, I'm going to introduce you as number 36, not number 7, with all deference to the Mech. Okay? That's it.
Surely.
So, here it goes. Now batting for the Yankees, number 36, Wayne Unger. Number 36. That's as
and the
good
crowd goes wild.
The crowd goes wild. That's the voice of the Yankees. What would have you given as a little kid to play in the New York Yankees? To play in the outfield maybe next to Mickey Mantle?
Oh, wow. You know, although I have to say, when I was young, I aspired more to be a pitcher than to be an outfielder.
Oh, okay.
I think, just like the whole control, controlling the game.
You're holding the ball. Nothing happens until you throw the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I used to throw the ball at the box, like the stick ball boxes. I would take
on the wall at the park.
On the wall, or even at home. Okay, I would put a box at one end of the room. I try to find the farthest angle, so I go a little bit. I try to go diagonal, and I would take a plastic ball, not a wiffle ball, something even lighter than that, and I would throw it in the carton. And anytime I got it in the box, it was a strike. Anytime I didn't get it, and I had small cartons, throw them in.
Right.
So yeah, I wanted to be a pitcher.
Any pitcher you admired more than any of the others?
Well, it was always Koufax. Even though I was a Yankee fan, I mean, it was, Koufax was at the top. I'm trying to think who else did I like. You know who I used to really enjoy watching pitch was Louis Piant. I loved watching him pitch.
With that delivery, he's looking behind him.
Looking behind him, the same way I used to love watching Fernando Valenzuela look up at the sky before,
Right.
It was just one of those things, And of course, Juan Marichal with that leg kick.
Yes. In my day, it was Warren Spahn with that leg kick. And I read recently, I don't think I read the whole book, I browsed through it. It was the book when Spahn and Marichal pitched 200 pitches each. I can't tell you how many innings. 13 innings. Mays hits a homer to end the game. The whole book was basically chronologizing that game between the two of them, and they were matching. Spahn was matching this kid at that time. Marichal might have been 25, Spahn maybe 38, and Spahn didn't quit. Spahn was one of my heroes as a kid, and he wasn't a Yankee or a Met or Giant. And I did root for the Milwaukee Braves very hard after the Giants left in '57 in that World Series in '57, and then the next year in '58, until I really started coming around to the Giants again and accepting them in San Francisco. And that wasn't, like I say, it wasn't easy for a kid, but the Braves were great in those days, and I wish that if for no other reason the Giants did move, were again to see the other teams coming in, the Musials, the greats on the Braves, and it wasn't just Aaron, it was Matthews and Covington and Johnny Logan playing shortstop, Del Crandall a catcher. Good ball clubs.
Yeah, you know, speaking of guys like Marichal and Spahn, and even like a Bob Gibson, can you imagine today, like, if, you know, how major league clubs and pitching coaches, like, what they would say and how they would try to change all those deliveries, you know, like, you know, in other words, like, they would tinker with them. They would say, "Oh no, we don't want you to do that." I mean, and they do that a lot today. They you know, they're big on angle. They're big on the plane of the ball. They like that higher arm angle. It's just, you know, and they want a more compact delivery. Of course, you know, the stolen base wasn't as prevalent back then either. So, you know, like, you know, you can get away with the high kick, and like Gibson was like all over the place. But you know what? The ball came over the plate, you know, or around the plate. And of course, they were able to back the hitter off the plate a lot more as well back then.
Well, the big question to me between the two eras is the pitch count thing and how that came about, and why is it led even with the pitch count? Why are there so many more injuries, it seems, today than there were back then, and abdominal injuries and oblique injuries, stuff that you didn't hear about? Pretty much guys were playing through them in those days. But why is it that there are so few complete games? That a guy could go entire career, be great, have maybe 12 complete games in his entire. As specialization has a lot to do with that, of course.
Yes, there's a number of reasons. One, of course, is you're protecting your investment. Of course, there is the specialist, the specialization with the setup guy. You get the two setup guys to get to the closer. There is also pitches, throw harder, and throwing harder puts more in your arm, and kids are throwing harder younger, and so they're putting all that tension on undeveloped arms, and kids are playing, in maybe not so much in New York, but even in New York, they have, they're playing on their summer teams and stuff. Kids in the warmer climates are playing way too much. They're not giving themselves any rest. I mean, there's just so many things that so many possibilities of what's contributing to it, and it could be a combination of everything. It could be just
could be building muscle mass by whatever means it's being built, and I'm not being judgmental because I believe anything that's goes into the body. It's being used maybe by 80%. I used to think it was 20%. It's probably 80% of even today with masks and with cover-ups. But I think the building up of this muscle mass becomes too much for the tendons to allow sometimes, and other
it's
parts
quite
of the
possible.
body.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
look at the guys. Look at the guys that go on forever. Look at guys that pitch well late in their careers. How many of them are big fat guys? Okay, I mean, yeah. Listen, Mickey Lolich. Wilbur Wood was a knuckleballer, but look at Bartolo Colon.
And he is spry. He's probably the best athlete on that pitching staff. He's probably the best athlete on that team. He's a tremendous.
Well, I tell you what, he's a tremendous athlete, and the things he does athletically, surprise you based on his size. But I wouldn't go as far as to say he's the best athlete on the pitching staff of that team.
He really is quick. If being an athlete is reaction, first step quickness.
I understand, but what I'm saying is, I think the perception is magnified because of his size.
Because he is that big. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
People are saying things about Pablo Sandoval, who was traded from the Giants. He had some very, very good years, big, too.
Oh, yes.
He's to the point where it's become almost ridiculous. You see pictures of him in spring training. He's eaten himself out of a career, but before he did that, he was bigger than your average bear and performing pretty well at one time or another. So, who was it? Was it Krug who said athlete? I'm no athlete. I'm a ball player. I'm a baseball player.
Yeah. Well, what I read that he's always been like this, and one of the coaches from the Red Sox says that he's always going to be big, but they have him working. He got away from his core, and they had him doing a lot of work on his core this winter. But from what I hear, he's still not all that impressive in camp right now, and so it remains to be seen. But this, they're stuck with him. It's too much money to eat. So unless they're willing to pay a good part of his salary. Yeah.
Isn't it sad this has become such a business? I was blind to it as a kid. I'm sure it was a business. The one question I wish I would have asked Erskine, and I was thinking about it while he was doing so, ask him about the union situation back then. There's this myth that these players would have played for nothing. There was even a book written by Bart Giamatti when the players would have played for nothing. No, man, they were Kiner and Robin Roberts. They were all in union negotiations and trying to get their lordships situation where they were held captive by these owners for their entire career changed. So I can't really complain from a humanistic standpoint that the business aspect, because it's become better. It really has in a lot of ways. But when business gets in the way, when we were talking the other day, when they were going to consider suspending Champion, what's his name? The guy they just got from the Reds.
Oh, Aroldis Chapman.
Chapman, I'm sorry.
Yes, and he was suspended for 30 days.
And he was, and that's going to end up helping the Yankees keep the kid for another year.
No, it's not. You see, he only got suspended for 30 days. Remember what I said a couple of weeks ago? I said the magic number is 45.
Oh, okay. Okay, so he'll still have his time, and
he'll be a free agent at the end of the year.
Okay, if he keeps clean then that sounds fair. Anything more than 30 days, first-time offender. He really seemed sincere when he said he didn't hurt anybody. He didn't mean to hurt anybody. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, but
first time,
he was still extremely
it's not like
reckless.
People are entitled to a comeback, a second chance. It's the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh times that you have to think about. And this isn't something like arbitrary like drugs. I don't think there should be any problems with drugs. They should all be prescribed, and people shouldn't be suspended. They should be given help for drug problems. This is smacking his wife. This is different. This is a physical, abusive thing, and that sets a bad tone, especially with what football was going through a year or so ago. And
it was his girlfriend, and in the end, like she said, there was he didn't touch her and this and that. But what the reason he was suspended is because he went into his garage and he fired a gun into the wall about 8 times, and I think I read somewhere that he was firing it outside and up in the air, and that's why and it was that recklessness. That was, he was the way he was blowing off steam at the incident. It was that recklessness, and that's why he got suspended.
Okay. He wasn't faced with criminal charges for that, or were they suspended?
No, he wasn't. He didn't. Okay. Which to me, I found that kind of strange. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I know it's very, guns are prevalent and easy to get in Florida. You can carry them. I mean, the whole nine. But I'm sorry, but in that particular, from what I read, I just found that in itself kind of strange. There was no reckless endangerment charge, nothing of the sort. That I found that kind of odd.
Yeah.
So.
In other words, you fired the bullet's got to come down. I don't know what they're thinking. You fire one up, it's got to come down somewhere. I think if it were you or I, and we weren't playing for a major league team, we'd have spent some time in the pokey.
To say the least.
Right, and there's that sense of entitlement doesn't set a good tone, and to be judged by the people that end up judging you in our society isn't good. Like, for instance, when a ball player sits in front of a congressman and does a mea culpa or refuses to do a mea culpa, one way or the other, who are they? This is Congress. They have more explaining to do to the United States of America than some guy that roiding up to put another $7 million in his pocket has to Congress. That's the way I look at it.
I'm with you.
Yeah, a judge.
So, I consider Congress just another branch of organized crime.
Right. For years I've done a podcast before I started doing exclusively the sports podcast, and I still keep my hand in where I talk about what I call the unholy trinity of organized religion, big business, and government, really just combining to make our lives very, very difficult on many, many different ways. And what scares me is the collusion. I'm just now learning about the extent of the collusion, of the cover-up of the steroid era from the top to the bottom. So the Steinbrenners, the commissioner, the great story that the press was provided with when Sosa and McGuire were going through it, and they sat on stories, and they had opened bottles of Android and cork, bats, cork coming out of bats and stuff, and just to make money, just to enrich the already rich. It's a crime, and it's, like I say, a microcosm of this corrupt country that we live in. But
I've been saying that for a while. I mean, it's amazing, that they come down on the players, but they turn their backs when it was making them money, okay? And then when it brought them negative attention, then all of a sudden they're cleaning it all up. So.
Right. Well, I no longer resent from moderating a show that Peter Golenbach did the other day. I have been led to believe, finally, the old purist that I am, is that we couldn't compare era to era in the old days, let alone in the new days with the steroids. Because in the old days, when you compare, say, the 50s or 60s to the 20s, well, you know what? There were a lot of things different. The size of the mound was different. Bob Gibson changed that. There was the fact that there were no black players playing before 1947. So my futile attempt to determine who was better, Ted Williams or Ty Cobb, well, you know what? It's impossible to compare because they were playing against different players with different dietary, not just steroids, different dietary habits, different exercise habits, and different training. So I'll just take the era as it is. I think the steroidal era is ongoing. I think the masks, the chemists that make the masks will always be ahead of the testers. And I think that given the enormous amount of money that these guys have at stake, that you can't hardly blame them anymore. And whether or not those steroids come back and rip up their bodies in later years, they're taking the chance, and I'm not going to take it personally on their behalf. Let them do it. The public obviously doesn't care. If you poll the people going to ball games, I want more home runs. I don't care what they take. What the hell? So what am I going to do? Keep blowing against the wind for the rest of my life? Barry Bonds was great. God bless him. Put him in the Hall of Fame. Put them all in the Hall of Fame with a little asterisk that just says they played in the steroid era, so their stats may be fucked up. That's just the way it is.
I feel as though it was a level playing field for the most part. I feel bad for the few, for the minority that didn't take it, but I think for the most part it was a level playing field. So
I feel bad for the 27th guy that didn't get to play in the majors because the 25th guy was juiced. And
as long as if the 27th guy wasn't juiced, or I should say the 26th guy.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
There was an article in Sports Illustrated a couple of years ago about 2 or 3 guys that played with 2 or 3 other guys that had taken steroids, and they're going through life. They're delivery guys for FedEx or whatever, and they're just living their lives of what could have been had they even known about steroids, or in some cases, or had the option, or weren't, or didn't feel like they were cheating. And on some level, they were cheating. Let's face it. And they knew it openly that they were cheating, and it doesn't justify it if all those other people cheated. Like my mother would have said, well, if they all jumped off the bridge, if all your friends are, would you want to jump off the bridge too? No, it's
Exactly. You know what? And I use something a little different. you know, when I hear people say, well, this guy's doing it and that guy's doing it, whatever it applies to, and I always say, well, I'm not. You know, I learned, if you don't see an example, be an example, and I learned that much later on in life. I learned that, I would say I was probably in my late 30s when I heard somebody say that. But you know what? I do my very best to live by it. I'm not perfect. No one is, but you know,
yeah.
I just always try to do the right thing.
That's all you can do. Do the best you can and live with the results. So let's talk about some Yankee prospects. What do you got in your head? Who do you think you'd like to follow this year that's maybe young on the fast track you like for one reason or another?
Wow. Well, I got to say that their shortstop is, their shortstop prospect, Mateo.
Right.
Is, he's right there. Aaron Judge gets a lot of press, but I think it's probably pronounced Jorge Mateo. I'm assuming it's Jorge Mateo, but, don't quote me on it. But I'll tell you what, he looks special. He kind of who can I say he reminds me of? Maybe reminds me a little bit of Jose Reyes. He's not a switch hitter. Wait, is he a switch hitter? But he reminds me of, a little bit of Reyes. He's got some pop. He's got not some speed. He's got a lot of speed. He looks special. Judge, I think will also, will be a solid to very good major league ball player, but he's still got some holes in his swing. He's got to go. I think he needs some time in AAA. He's got to go against craftier pitches. Gary Sant. I'm talking, but these are all their top prospects. But Mateo's the guy that sticks out.
Okay.
For sure.
For me, I like a left-handed bat for the Mets, Dominic Smith, who has got a lot of power, and I like his stroke, and that's my favorite. I'm going to follow him all year. My Mets are loaded at shortstop. They've got this guy, Gavin Cecchini. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. They've got Amen Rosario at shortstop coming up. Whenever you see a team with 2 or 3 good shortstops in their organization, gotta like that. And their number 1 prospect pitched in the World Series last year. Steven Matz, Long Island kid. I'll be rooting for him. And you know what I'm going to be rooting for is health. Spring training health. For the first 2 or 3 weeks, any news you hear is negative news sometimes. I want guys to stay healthy, and if the Mets stay healthy this year, I really think they have the best chance of winning in the National League East. Can't take it past there because the Cubs are great in the Midwest League. I want to say the Central League, NL Central, and I really think they're up and comers. And you know what? I kind of root for them. Wouldn't it be nice to see the Cubs do well?
Well, they did do well last year.
Yeah, but I mean, really take it that one step further. Mets knocked them off. I wasn't sorry to see that, of course. But if somebody has to beat the Mets, wouldn't mind it for the Cubs. A lot of long-suffering folks. In our lifetime, they haven't won, which says quite a bit.
Actually, in a couple of lifetimes.
Yes, right.
I think the last time they went to the series was like 1945, maybe. And the last time they won a series was it 15 or 16? I forget. But it's been like 100 years.
Yeah, it's and I really feel for them. And there are some great fans that we grew up where I thought it was a birthright to have the World Series played in my backyard every year. I mean, for years and years, New York-based teams, even as late as '59 when the Dodgers won in L.A., there was still a New York-based team on some levels. Just all these teams in the World Series year after year, Giants, Yankees, Dodgers. It was great. As are you, my friend. We had a nice conversation tonight.
Yes, we did.
And
yes, we did.
We got some guests, future guests on hand that we're not going to let the cat out of the bag until we get final confirmation. But we going to continue to entertain you with folks who are in the know, like us. I think we got some good knowledge to pass on, and I've enjoyed your company as I usually do, Wayne Unger. And
thank you. The same here.
All right, and I know you got stuff going on tonight. We're going to wrap this up, and I just want to tell everybody out there to keep on keeping on. Life is a roller coaster. You're up, you're down, you're over and out, but if you could just try to be the same when you're up as you are when you're down, and just remember that you're doing the best you can and living with the results. Thanks, friend. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thank you, Ralph. Have a great night. Good night, everybody.
You too. All right. Be well.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.